So good afternoon, everyone, on this unseasonally warm spring day. My name's Andrea Leong, and I'm the president of WePlanet Australia, which is the local arm of WePlanet, a global network of eco-humanist organisations working to liberate nature and elevate humanity. I'm signed in from Gadigal land in inner Sydney. Thank you all for signing in from your parts of the continent or beyond to join our second annual conference. At our first annual conference this time last year, we were known as Replanet Australia with an R. You might be aware that we had a name change in February this year. So huge thanks to all of the voting members of WePlanet Australia who came along to that general meeting in February and made the name change a very straightforward process. Now, this afternoon, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers, and a theme that runs through today is the idea of placemaking. We are passionate about preserving our ecosystems and native habitats, and as Australia is a highly urbanised population, we also recognise the importance of making cities livable, good places to be, with abundant electricity for homes and industry, and frequent public transport to reduce our car dependence, and safe and secure water supply in our changing climate. First up, I will run through WePlanet Australia's work from the past year, and then we'll get Tyrone Delisle to give us updates from WePlanet around the world, because we're very happy to be part of that global network. So I'll start with this time last year. It's wild to think that 2024 has only been our second year in existence. And so the year in review starts with last year's AGM and conference. We had a day of talks, much like this one, excuse me, although that was held in person in Sydney. And it was wonderful to connect with people from Sydney and beyond, from much further, in fact. We were stoked to have guests from the US. We had Paris Ortiz-Wines of Stand Up for Nuclear and Mark Nelson, that nuclear guy. They joined us for the conference, as well as a fantastic trip to ANSTO's facility at Lucas Heights, nestled in Sydney's leafy southern suburbs. Australia's Opal reactor is probably the world's hardest working research and medical isotope reactor. It's online 300 days a year, producing nuclear medicine, which on average every Australian will use once in their lifetime. And it does hard work, including it supplies 50% of the world's supply of irradiated silicon. And that's a material that's used in high-powered electronics, including wind turbines and electric vehicles. So nuclear technology is enabling the clean energy transition on multiple levels. Nuclear technology and renewables are already working together to deliver low carbon solutions. And this is Australia's nuclear industry. Don't let any politician tell you that Australia doesn't have a nuclear industry. It's not a nuclear energy industry yet, but we are not starting from scratch. This is a really solid foundation for Australia to move into nuclear energy, should we as a nation choose to embrace it. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself. I haven't introduced our campaigns and what we work on. So also at last year's conference, we introduced and clarified our major campaign areas, and these are current to this day. Firstly, we have Rethink Nuclear, our campaign to lift the legislative ban on nuclear energy in Australia and to put it on the same footing as other low emissions technologies like wind and solar. And secondly, there is Reboot Food, our campaign to promote alternative proteins and gaining support of public opinion, lobbying for government policies that promote research, development and commercialisation of meat alternatives so that they can compete on the market. Now, let me just explain meat alternatives. That means plant proteins, either traditional like tofu or things like oat milk, which is really popular in Australia, or high-tech like Impossible mince. And in a different category, there is the newer forms of alternative proteins known as cellular agriculture, which is a biotech arm of the alternative proteins. So cellular agriculture includes cultured meat. So in the past, we've known it as lab-grown meat, but it's not a science project in the lab anymore. It's an industrial product produced in the factory, and we're calling it cultured meat now, for clarity. That's grown from animal cells without the whole animal. And there's also precision fermentation, which involves getting bacteria or yeast to grow, for example, milk proteins, so that we can have dairy without the cow. Precision fermentation is perhaps the more promising technology in the short term, in terms of being commercially viable at scale, but neither cultured meat nor precision fermented dairy are available in Australia yet, which is outrageous, I think, for a country that's always been at the forefront of both agriculture and biotechnology. Now back to our campaigns. I mentioned Rethink Nuclear and Reboot Food. There's also this one in the middle, our McChoice campaign, which is part of Reboot Food. We are petitioning McDonald's Australia to include plant-based menu items. Before going into more details, it's important to explain why we're focusing on these areas, nuclear and food. It's not just because we think splitting the atom and growing meat without the animal are cool, although I do think these are among the coolest things that we can do. It comes back to our core desire to protect and restore our climate and ecosystems. Energy is the source of most of our greenhouse gas emissions, and animal farming emits a disproportionate amount of greenhouse gas emissions compared to crop farming. And animal farming is also the leading cause of deforestation. So we need to reform our energy and our food systems if we want to look after the environment and look after people. So what can we do with this information? That our energy and food production systems take a toll on the planet? Thought that humans were fundamentally bad, we could argue for using less energy. But we're all here today because we think humans are good, and we think that living longer and healthier lives, thanks to modern technology, is good. So every time we say no to something that is environmentally high impact, like fossil fuels and deforestation, we say yes to something else that is environmentally lower impact to fill that role. Renewables and plant-based proteins that we have now are a great start, but the renewables available to us in Australia, wind and solar, are just not very powerful. Nuclear energy is powerful, and it performs equally well or better on environmental and safety metrics. So if we're serious about a sustainable energy future, nuclear must be given the same government support that renewables currently enjoy in Australia. Similarly, plant proteins are great, but they just don't fill the same cultural role as meat. They're different foods. And this is why nuclear energy and meat and milk without the animal are powerful technologies for protecting our environment while maintaining modern, high-energy living standards. Now I'm going to talk first about our Reboot Food campaign, including McChoice, and then about Rethink Nuclear. So this time last year, we launched our McChoice campaign, petitioning McDonald's to include plant-based menu items. And we're doing this because McDonald's is the largest fast food restaurant in Australia. They boast about having 2 million customers per day, and it's sometimes the only option on the highway or late at night, or as I found recently at the airport at around midnight. This campaign is all about choice. It's not about taking away any options. It's about providing more options for people who find themselves finding that McDonald's is the best option for them at the time. The petition page here is our lead food lead campaigner for Reboot Food, Ash Geraghty, launching the campaign this time last year in Sydney. The petition page has gained 643 signatures so far. We do need your help to share it. Please sign it and share it if you haven't already. The petition page started with this cheeky red and yellow branding. It's since moved to this new page, very mindful, very demure, standard WePlanet petition page. So please do share it. As I mentioned, it is mcchoice.au. That will redirect you to the petition page. Now, we got 200 of these signatures in just a few days after the petition was shared online by Vegan Australia, which we really appreciate. And it's this sort of networking that is going to grow this petition. So if you are connected with groups like that, please share it. See if you can get it shared on pages like that. Continuing on the McChoice campaign, on the 22nd of April this year, Earth Day, Ash came down to Sydney and we held a street action with placards and postcards informing people that animal farming was the biggest cause of deforestation in Australia. We did that outside one of the 4 busy McDonald's restaurants in the Sydney CBD, just to point out the dominance of McDonald's. We got some great engagement there, and then we got the train out to McDonald's Australia head office in Sydney's suburbs because we had a letter for them. It was difficult to deliver this letter. It's a fortress. Turns out one does not simply walk into Macca's head office. Fortunately, someone in their corporate impact team walked past and we were able to hand our letter directly to them. And we did get a reply a month or so later. I should point out that, yeah, we had tried to send this letter. We did send this letter several times by registered post, and then we'd call them and they'd say it was not received. So it was nice to have some accountability and hand them this letter in person. We did get a reply, and that was basically an abrogation of any responsibility to do better. They claimed that the market would lead them into changing or adding new items to their menu, which is funny because I don't remember anyone asking for the McRib to be brought back. And we do have evidence that Australians want plant-based foods. So we have to ask ourselves, is the McChoice petition a good idea? The evidence says, yes, it is. The absolute legends at the Australian think tank Food Frontier released a report recently on trends in Australians' diets and their attitudes towards plant-based diets. So the interesting thing here is that if you add up, there's my laser pointer, flexitarian, meat reducer, vegan, and vegetarian, then that's a total of 44% of Australians who are looking to eat less meat or no meat. Our pitch to Macca's so far was based on older information, and we'd said 1 in 4 Australians, about 25%, is eating no meat or less meat. But as we see here, that proportion is growing, 44%. Now, this is self-reported. I have to suspect that these 5% vegans and 10% vegetarians are sneaking in some meat that they're not admitting to, because that is higher than the usual reports. But the point is, this is self-reported data of people saying that they're eating no meat or less meat. So the point is that people want to eat less meat given the option, these 44% of people. But McDonald's Australia is just not providing them that option. It's one of very few fast food places that isn't providing that option, despite having this inclusive image that they like to portray. So it's time we got back to them with a new letter with these new findings. Here is on the right here a chart of what other fast food places are doing. Domino's, Hungry Jack's, Starbucks, Nando's, Guzman and Gomez, Subway and Pizza Hut. They all provide substantial plant-based options in Australia, the UK and the US, with the exception of Hungry Jack's or Burger King in the US. McDonald's Australia is really resistant for some reason to providing a plant-based option, even though they do it in the UK. One of the things we found out from talking to people at the Earth Day action in Sydney was that McDonald's Fiji offers plant-based nuggets as an alternative to their chicken nuggets. But we can't get a plant-based burger here. We had a short trial of it in 2022, and that was taken off the menu, despite the fact that it's obviously popular in other places. Another interesting point is that over 1/3 of the people who are eating less meat or no meat, this is another finding from the Food Frontier survey, over 1/3 of them say that they're doing that for environmental reasons. So the message is getting through that plant foods are kinder on the earth and obviously kinder on animals. We can take as an interesting case study, I think, late last year, Guzman and Gomez, who is on this graph, they very nearly wouldn't have made this this green tick in Australia. Late last year, Guzman and Gomez dropped their shredded shiitake option from the menu. They'd always had this shredded mushroom option in addition to their meat options. After 6 months, middle of this year, they put it back on the menu, and they call them plant-based, despite the fact that mushrooms are obviously fungus. I hate to be cynical, but that feels like a deliberately timed controversy from Guzman and Gomez, because the shiitake option came back a week before the company went public on the stock market. But if it was deliberate, that means Guzman and Gomez believed that removing the non-meat option would cause controversy, because they know their market. They know that many people want to have a plant-based option, even if they do eat meat. They just want the option. So this is why we are petitioning McDonald's to provide what the Australian people want. Also within our Reboot Food campaign, we've made a couple of written submissions to FSANZ this year. That is Food Standards Australia, New Zealand, and they set the standards for food, as the name suggests, including approval of novel foods, so foods that we haven't got on the market at the moment in Australia or New Zealand. It's their responsibility to assess these foods as being safe to people and the environment. So in February this year, we made a submission on cultured quail. Now this one, it's making me a bit nervous. In early 2023, a Sydney company called Vow, who you might remember from the mammoth meatball stunt, early last year they submitted an application to make their cultured quail meat available in Australia. And that process of approval was expected to take 12 months. It's now been over 18 months, and we're not sure where the progress is on that. So I would like to find out. The benefits of cultured meat are that it uses less land, less water than animal farming. It emits minimal methane. The energy that's used to produce it is electricity, which can be made cleaner, whereas methane emitted from animals sort of can't be. And there's less risk of animal-borne diseases like bird flu when, well, there's no risk of animal-borne diseases when you don't have these animals in close quarters, and it's obviously better for animal welfare. So these are the points that we made in our submission in support of making cultured quail available in Australia. So as I said, I'm getting a bit nervous because it's coming up to about 20 months now, and Vow was able to submit an application to sell their product in Singapore later than they applied here, and it's since been approved in Singapore. So if you're in Singapore anytime, try and get a taste of this cultured quail. Just last week, we made a second submission to FSANZ, and that was on the pretty nondescript proposal P1055. But that proposal, our submission was in support of sensible regulation for new breeding techniques, also known as new genomic techniques. Now, these are technologies that are the newer generation of genetic modification or genetic engineering. Technologies like CRISPR-Cas9, which you might have heard of, these are very precise editing tools, like using a scalpel rather than using an axe, which you might describe the traditional GMO approach as. This makes them more predictable than traditional GMOs and therefore even more safe, noting that our food assessment process is rigorous and the few GMO foods that we can buy are very safe. The other advantage of new genomic techniques is how fast they are in comparison to older GMO methods. They let scientists and farmers quickly develop new strains of crops that are drought resistant in our changing climate or more productive per hectare. So we can use less land, less fertilizer, or disease resistant, so we can use less pesticide. Intelligent regulation of this technology to let it be used more often will be another win for people and the environment. So huge thanks to Murray from Melbourne, who wrote this submission with his biosciences expertise. Now, moving on to our other major campaign area, nuclear energy, our Rethink Nuclear campaign. There have been big movements in nuclear in the past 12 months, and we just have to ride the wave. I had the incredible opportunity to attend the climate summit COP28 in Dubai last year. I got to visit the Baraka nuclear power plant, which was an extremely humbling experience, looking out at sunset as this giant would be pumping out 4 gigawatts of clean power all night. That was when 3 out of 4 of the reactors were running, and the fourth one has since been turned on. The best time for Australia to have started building nuclear power plants was in 1998 when we banned them. But the second best time is now. Being there and experiencing that was important to me, but at the same time in Dubai, something important to the world was happening. At COP28, leaders from 22 countries signed a pledge to triple nuclear energy capacity by 2050. It was the most nuclear positive climate summit ever held, and the atmosphere was electric, no pun intended. This commitment is bearing fruit now with announcements like Japan is preparing to restart the world's largest nuclear power plant with a capacity of nearly 8 gigawatts. That could supply nearly all of New South Wales. South Korea has approved new nuclear. Italy's making moves to reverse its ban on building nuclear power plants. And Norway, who has long said, no, we don't need nuclear, Norway's now considering joining its nuclear-powered neighbours in Sweden and Finland. It's a really exciting time for clean energy. Obviously, we've had developments in Australia with nuclear energy becoming a partisan issue, and that would be a real shame if it continues this way. So that's why we have our nuclear petition petitioning the Labor government to overturn Australia's nuclear energy ban. This petition's almost at 2,000 signatures. Please sign it and share if you haven't already. In fact, if you have signed it, share it again. It's becoming really cool to support nuclear energy. Like the flexitarian thing, we have polling to show that public support for nuclear energy is on the rise in Australia. So get in early and share this petition so you have the receipts and you can say, I supported nuclear in 2024. That said, women are much more likely than men to say in a survey that they are undecided or they don't know whether they support nuclear energy for Australia. So one thing we're doing at the moment is running these social media ads showcasing women who support nuclear energy. The idea here is social proof. That is, people generally feel more comfortable supporting something when they see other people supporting it, in particular, people who are like them. Obviously, there's a lot more to a person than gender, but given the very clear gender split when it comes to vocally supporting nuclear energy, promoting pro-nuclear women's voices is a reasonable angle for us to take. These ads are generating a lot of engagement online. The challenge now is to translate that into real world action. And that's something that we're doing next week, working with our friends at Nuclear for Climate Australia and the Going Fission podcast. We'll be speaking in Morwell in Victoria's Latrobe Valley, answering questions from all the interested locals in this coal mining region. That's on Wednesday next week. So Australia's electricity is still more than 50% coal-fired, and we need to produce at least twice as much electricity as we do now if we're going to electrify everything. The scale of the energy transition is huge. It's really huge, and there are whole towns that have historically relied on coal mining and coal power generation for their existence. A transition to nuclear is a lifeline for them as well as a win for the planet. Now, finally, jumping back to February of this year, we were very happy to have Bryony Edwards present a talk at our monthly member meeting. Bryony's one of the original campaigners who pushed for declaration of a climate emergency and was part of the group that got Darebin Council in Melbourne to be the first government body in the world to declare a climate emergency. Bryony spoke with us about the Climate Rescue Accord, of which she is a co-founder, and this is a new instrument to recognise that a safe global climate will need us to actively remove carbon from the atmosphere. Net zero, if carbon emissions is just a step on the way to a safe climate, it's not the be-all and end-all. There's still more to go once we reach net zero. We're always open to having interesting and relevant talks like this, so please share with us your connections so that all of us pro-humanity environmentalists can work together and be stronger together. Thank you.